Mr. Ma, Mr. YoYo Ma.
Just call me Yo-Yo, okay?
You're here in support of your son's film, okay? But I wonder if you could say, even if you didn't have this family connection, what do you find valuable about sort of drawing upon your particular art form to come and support another artist's piece of work?
Whoa. I think everything that I've seen in the film is about people trying to connect to something that is bigger than themselves. And I think that's why I play music. Connect to something that's bigger than yourself with other people. So I think that in terms of the value of what I see in the film, aside from the familial connection, which is hard to say, aside from that, but if I were to say, I find that there are such similar draws in what this film is trying to do and sort of the way that I'm trying to lead my life. So, and I was so moved by that to see the attempt to see Michael bringing people together to discuss a knotty issues, not N-A-U-G-H-T-Y, K-N-O-T-T-Y, issues, and to how to untie those knots, because ultimately we are humans and we believe, and we are people of faith that really want to be aspirational in bringing our best selves forward in our daily lives and in our work. Would you say that's true? Is that how you feel the film is portrayed?
I think the film is about aesthetics. At the end of the day, the guiding principle of the film is to seek the beautiful in the other, to see the beautiful in the other, to pursue the beautiful together, to pursue the beautiful that transcends the two. And so, in conversations with Nicholas about art and faith, Christians spend a lot of time arguing about doctrine and about epistemology, how we know things, and I've kind of made a firm shift into aesthetics, like what allows us to live a beautiful life. And I think that's what these people were pursuing, and they find Jesus uniquely beautiful. But it is about living a more beautiful life together. And so it's, to me, about art. Absolutely.
I love that. A mentor of mine said, kind of just mapping out intellectual history of, not long ago, especially in Christian circles or theological circles, it was you led with truth. If we can get to the truth, then we'll be okay. And that'll lead to ethics, to goodness, and then to beauty, right? And then, let's say it was the 60s, and then things shifted and it was goodness. Like, how do you become, what does it mean to pursue the good? And if you pursue the good, that will lead you to truth and then beauty. And he said it more recently, it really is leading with beauty. That you really can't get to what it means to live the good life or to be a moral person if you don't go through the doorway of beauty first. And I think people are hungry for it. And then in moments like these, film, you go, oh, that's why I find the truth of it is undeniable because you gave it to me in this beautiful tapestry. So I wonder if both of you could comment on that from your distinct artistic perspectives. If we get down to this film and this really knotty conversation, do you see maybe art in general or your particular mediums as necessary to unravel that knot for individual viewers and then maybe society as a whole?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I've always been drawn to film, and maybe it's an act of rebellion against music. If music is deeply abstract and you can't say, oh, it means this or it is this, film is incredibly real and tangible. It creates a reality in front of you. And so in a way with film, the challenge is how do you transcend that reality to something that's higher? It's so easy to be trapped in saying, oh, it's just this, this is what it is. And your goal in making a film is to gesture at something that's not quite there, even though you feel this literalness in front of you. And I feel like, one of the things that my father's always said is how do you transcend technique, right? How do you get past that? And I feel like that's so embedded in this film, both in the making of it. How do you transcend the literalness of what's happening and these passages that are more lyrical, these moments that are direct to camera sort of allow us to enter into a different world? How do you transcend the technique of conflict transformation? How do you sort of say, okay, well, great, we have a curriculum, but really we actually also have, 12, 14, 16 people sitting around together. How are we transcending that and becoming one another, yielding to one another? And how do we transcend that as viewers and sort of see that space between us and the screen sort of evaporate and have a film sort of enter into us and become a part of the lens through which we look at the world, rather than something that exists over there that we see, wipe our hands of, and walk away from. So, I don't know.
Wow, it's interesting. You're talking about collapsing the distance between the viewer and the screen, right? Or transcending technique. And as you were talking, I was actually thinking of the title of the film, The Leap of Faith. And you were talking about music as something abstract in that, notes, but what do these notes mean? And I was thinking actually that at the moment of performance, or at the moment of living, if you want, but let's say in my field, in the moment of performance, you're not acting, you're being. That requires a leap of faith, a leap of reality. It's like you have to wholly enter into another world in order to faithfully represent it. And because that requires, time travel, geographic travel, in order to embody not only another person's mind, but their points of view contextually. What period were they living in? And so to do that requires everything you got. It requires, your mental capacity, your how big your heart can be, and how big your spirit can be, and how much healthy ego you have to say, I can enter there, as opposed to say, oh, no, this is way too much for me. I am not that. And so you have to get into that. And for me, there's something incredibly powerful. It's sort of like the best thing that we can do for one another is to enter into one other's beauty, right? What is your highest aspiration? I'm there with you. I'm there with you. And that's actually something that we have in religion. It's something that we have in, the pursuit of a kind of beauty, of aesthetic. But it's also what I think we all have also in society. What does it feel to be American, right? And, I'm a patriot. You're a patriot too. How do you show your patriotism? And great, you like loyalty. Okay, I like justice. Let's put the two together, and what do we get? Those are all ways that we can actually cross each other's sort of just edges, and you just get to that point. You get to that edge and you see beyond, and suddenly a whole world opens up, and it's beautiful.
That's really interesting. As you're talking, it makes me think of something Michael said previously, or where the film goes. And we were talking about some failure, or risks of failure in storytelling and artwork. I think it's Niels Bohr that says, an expert is someone who has failed in every way possible in a given domain. I think about that, like when your craft becomes expert when you've just failed, over and over. And there's a kind of failure that's actually a success in the way you're describing it. That if art or even the Colossian Forum is an exercise in building empathy or compassion for, like feeling what it feels like to be in somebody else's body for a minute. That is a win because of how it immediately opens up a whole new reality that otherwise is just impossible. So I wonder if that, Michael, is something that you think consciously about in terms of, since you described it as aesthetic, is that kind of where you're going? What I'm doing here is we're feeling the world through other people's eyes and senses, and that's the only way we can move forward towards, let's say it's American conflict, religious conflict, whatever.
Yeah, I think we're so trained to see difference as threats. I mean, it's all around us all the time. And so we don't have the habits of seeing difference as the possibility that you just described, or YoYo just described, in terms of entering in to see the world from an entirely different point of view. We're not familiar with that anymore. And which is why I think the film is so important, because I think it allows us to actually see the world from these various perspectives in ways that we don't normally get to see all of the mess, but also the beauty of it. Because we're so used to seeing conflict go badly, we have lost the imagination for how difference can be generative and how difference can be a gift, right? And so creating a space where whether it be pursuing what it means to be American from these different spots, or trying to understand how to think about marriage from different locations theologically. We're trying to do something that transcends either one of the individuals, right? That is what life as a social creature is about, right? It's aesthetics that allows us to transcend my hunched, my entrenchment. It's the imagination of something more beautiful and fuller and truer and more a higher moral good. It's an aesthetic vision that calls us out of that. And when we discover that aesthetic vision in the other person, they express an aspect of beauty that you didn't expect them to, because they're the enemy. That's when the world opens up, right? And you see this all over the film, where whether it be Joan or Artie, I mean, they're the kind of the two poles. Each one of them have these moments of profound beauty, right? And people are drawn to it from across, right? And so I think whenever there is a chance to see a story like that or hear something, I think we want to celebrate it and point people towards it.
And it's interesting, I mean, you talk about beauty. The other word that comes to mind, and I think is deeply linked, is mystery, right? And I think mystery is something that can feel really scary, but it's also something that we are drawn to, right? And the more we can see our being drawn to that as being drawn to something, to possibility as opposed to danger, right? But that mystery is just, it's what inhabits, I think it's our most deep human desire to explore, to understand, to encounter mystery, and to find something within it. And it's certainly something that motivated me in making this movie, right? How do you watch people explore mystery? How do you watch people encounter mystery and contend with it? Because it helps me. It helps me experience the mystery in my life and find it beautiful and not threatening.
That's great. It makes me think, if you don't mind sharing some, because now you're dabbling in the realm of the mystics, and a profoundly sort of religious group who say, anything we can say about God is so wrong that really we ought to say nothing. It's mystery. Not that it's unknowable, but it exceeds our ability to. It's just ever exhaustive, right? Maybe say a little bit about your own kind of spiritual journey, kind of walking through this exploration of mystery with this particular group. Kind of how's that shaped you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I always loved science and math as a kid, and I think what's fascinating is when you get to the edges of any field, you encounter mystery again, and you see that in things like the Gödel incompleteness theorem, right? That there cannot be a system that fully explains everything. We see that at the boundaries of science, where it's like beyond a certain size, you cannot know what happens. And it's almost as if the universe in every way, whether it's through faith or through science or through the mystery of like, I don't know what's going through Cutter's head right now, reminds us that there are things we cannot know. And I feel like it's been so helpful to hear that articulated through the realm of faith, because it makes faith something so much more human, One of the pastors, Andrew Vanover, said, he's like, I can only see one aspect of who God is, and for me to imagine that I could see all of it would be hubris, right? And I think there's something so beautiful about that, to sort of suggest that, wow, to think that I could know the universe is hubris, right? But that also means there will never be a shortage of things to explore. And I feel like that kind of comfort is something that I feel like I jokingly refer to them as my pastors. Whenever I'm in New York, I'm like, I gotta go see my pastors. And it's like to have not just
12 of them.
Yeah, I was about to say, plus Michael. I feel very well pastored, and each of them in their way reminds me of a different way that mystery is encountered in our lives. And for me, that makes faith feel like the natural endpoint, as opposed to a strange decision. It's sort of the only logical conclusion is that we have to hold some kind of faith because we're confounded by mystery.
YoYo, as you hear your son talk, I have 3 youngish kids. My oldest is 14. They're all in the arts. My middle just started, and she's in performing arts, and the director just sent us through email some notes on her first performance, and they're very good and constructive, but she has to work on things, and I'm like, how dare you, I just wonder, as a dad who has a son who happens to be talking about mystery, making films, giving to people a kind of vision of life that probably you hadn't anticipated and couldn't predict, and that's what makes it joyful and wonderful. Maybe just reflect a bit on, basically the easy question is, what makes you proud of Nicholas when you see his work?
Well, I think, it starts, since we're talking about mystery, and for me, the faith part in looking at your own child starts from the very beginning. The second I saw you being born, it's like you were a miracle. And the second thought that came into my mind is that, okay, so this is what unconditional love means. That's a leap of faith. You just said, no matter what happens, this is forever love. I mean, who does that, right? Isn't that taking a big risk? No, you don't. I hear you talking about your children. I mean, it's like, we're all 4 parents here. We've all experienced that. And then the mystery part is, first of all, is following your child's journey through everything that you've been through. The joys, the heartaches, everything. And guess what? It's getting more and more interesting because we're having all these conversations, about faith, about love, about transcendence, about mystery, it's, my goodness, it's amazing that we can have, 42 years later, we're talking about these things, and you're self-propelling in terms of pursuing your interests, and I'm just standing by and watching with awe and amazement and thinking that I guess the feeling that I get is one of tremendous gratitude. Just, I'm so grateful for you. And Nicholas, even from an early part in his life, was already, very observant and opinionated, thoughtful, and but giving me advice that are really, that I treasure, right? So like, so it's like a reverse thing, or it's a circular thing. I don't know whether I say anything that's valuable, but I get lots of valuable, insights and suggestions and whatever from things that you observe, and whether it's from your generation or how to deal with certain situations, and they're all really golden nuggets, and so it's a continuing sort of journey, and we're signed on for life, and basically I can observe and sometimes participate, and it's such an incredible joy and such an incredible blessing, but the main emotion is one of just incredible gratitude.
Well, that's highly reciprocated. It's funny because earlier we were talking about the sort of improbability of Michael and my friendship, right? It's like 5 years ago we didn't know each other existed, and now I can't imagine my life continuing without Michael being a part of it in some way. I think there's almost like the opposite beauty and surprise in encountering someone that you've known your entire life, as if for the first time again, and I think so much of the experience as a child is like, are you, cleaving to your parents, or are you running away from your parents, right? And then at some point, it dawns on you that suggests that you and your parents are in the same place, and you're not. And I feel like the journey of this film has also been this wonderful journey of realizing that we're in different places, but running towards each other, in some highly unexpected way. And that so many of the things that have long fascinated you, I sort of find in the work that I'm doing, not by intention. In fact, almost probably despite intention. and yet there is this sense of like, wow, no, this is, it's beautiful to run towards something, run towards each other, to find oneself running towards each other. And yeah, I feel like this film, more than any other film that I've made or anything else that I've done, has been that beautiful, transcendent realization of we're running towards each other.
That's really interesting. That's a wonderful visualization of that, and I know the feeling of sort of trying to run away from not being your father, or not, and I experienced the befuddlement of sort of saying, wait a minute, we're actually talking about the same thing, like, gee, that's, how interesting is that?
Yeah.
And it's great that you search in different areas, and then we come to similar places, sort of like something that goes like this, right? But what I respect so much, and I see that Michael in the film, that the struggles that we as individuals and as parents or as children feel, that we have to be able to move away. We have to somehow confront ourselves through our children, right? Because you're half of me, so whatever happens, like, I'm at least half responsible for, for no judgment call for all of it, and that's kind of interesting, and I have to kind of make peace with all of that, with whatever I think my worldview is, so that it has to fall under something that I can live with. I think that's something that you spoke so eloquently about, Michael, in the film. And I feel like when, I'll stop talking. I'll just say one thing. After September 11th, Mr. Rogers came out of retirement, and you taught me this. You told me that Mr. Rogers was asked, what do you tell a very young child who's looking at a crisis, and they're saying, what happens, what can I do? And you told me that Mr. Rogers said, always look for the helpers. And I thought that was one of the most beautiful explanations for anything I've ever seen. And to look for the helpers implies being able to ask for help, which implies being able to be vulnerable, which actually implies that is not a weakness but a strength. And that is huge.
That's wonderful. Thank you. My last question was going to be, what's the spiritual conversation the film's inviting us to have? But I kind of think you answered it, So pursuing each other, fiercely pursuing the other. What do you say is the conversation, the spiritual conversation this film's inviting us to have?
I'm gonna actually answer the question indirectly, which is listening to you talk about performing and having to empty yourself. You behind a camera for countless hours, really listening other people into speech is a kind of self-emptying. And I think, the heart of the Christian mystery is a God who empties himself out for the sake of the world, that we might also learn to empty ourselves. And I just see, it's wonderful to see the two of you here to say, oh, I get it. I know where this comes from. I know that we are part of this mystery together of pouring ourselves out, not knowing what's going to happen. But the moment you saw Nicholas, this is unconditional love. This is what it means to see the other truly as an image bearer, and to just say, I'm yours, you're mine. And that is a wonderful mystery to be a part of.